In Ecuador, the president, Guillermo Lasso, and the police commanders were denounced for the murder of the presidential candidate, Fernando Villavicencio. The Argentine government has renewed the standing price agreements in force with wholesale marketing chains, large hypermarket chains, and mass consumer manufacturers. And the Ministry of Defense of Niger confirmed that 17 members of its armed forces were killed in a terrorist attack. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Guatemala, less than a week before the presidential elections to be held on Sunday 20th, the highest electoral body confirmed that 68% of the boxes with the voting material have already been shipped. The Communications Office of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal confirmed that in addition to national distribution, the material has also been sent to the United States for voting abroad. They have also reported that supplies to the polling stations have been distributed in all the departments except in the metropolitan area. David de Leon, spokesperson for the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, indicated that they have set a deadline for the delivery of all the voting material for the 19th of August. In Colombia, citizens and the government prepare for the upcoming regional elections. On October 29th, Colombians will go to the polls to elect new provincial and municipal authorities. This election day is of utmost importance for Petro's government since it will assess the influence of a series of reforms undertaken since his arrival to power. Several social and religious movements will take part in the process of providing information. On Tuesday in Ecuador, President Guillermo Lasso and the police commanders were denounced for the murder of the presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio. According to Edison Carrillo, the lawyer and candidate to the National Assembly for the Amigo movement, there was willful omission in the murder that occurred last July 26 in the midst of a wave of escalating violence in Ecuador. Carrillo, who has been coordinator of commerce of Quito, had used on his account of the social network Twitter, renamed X, labels such as crime of state and assassination detailed at his exit of the courts the nature of the judicial proceeding. And the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, during his morning conference, said he will hold talks with his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden, on Latin America.
We are going to have a meeting with President Biden in November. That will be during a meeting of Pacific and Asian countries. And he invited me. And we're going to have a bilateral meeting.
The Mexican head of state also pointed out that the International Monetary Fund is partly responsible for Argentina's debt, which exceeded the country's ability to pay during Mauricio Macri's government.
In the case of Argentina, they have been greatly affected by the economic crisis because the right-wing conservative government of Macri completely indebted the country with the complicity of the International Monetary Fund. Because they gave him money when Argentina's ability to pay was exceeded, and because they gave him more than the bill, because the elections were in the middle, and they wanted the right-wing conservative Macri to continue as president. However, Macri did not win. Alberto Fernandez won, and a huge debt remained, and the International Monetary Fund turned its back on them when they were jointly responsible for it.
In Peru, the Association of Relatives of the Dead and Injured in the Ayacucho region has called for a speedy investigation into the 49 fatalities and deaths registered during the protests in this and other regions. In this regard, the vice president of the organization, Giovanna Mendoza, denied a recent statement by the Attorney General, Patricia Benavides, who was repudiated during a visit to Ayacucho by demonstrators who accused her of being an accomplice in the massacre. She also said that the organization has presented clear evidence of how at least 10 civilians were killed in Ayacucho during the protests against the appointment of President Dina Boluarte. Human rights groups also demanded justice in the investigation opened against the President Boluarte and several of her ministers and former ministers. And the Argentine government has renewed the standing price agreements in force with wholesale marketing chains, large hypermarket chains, and mass consumer manufacturers. The items included in this agreement will go up 5% each month for the next 3 months until October. The agreement also includes tax relief measures, that is, tax reductions with which the government intends to compensate companies affected by the new value of the dollar, which this Monday, after the result of the primary elections, shot up to 22%. This is one of the latest measures to curb year-on-year inflation, currently standing at 114%, and to cope with possible economic destabilization ahead of presidential elections in October 22nd. And now we go to Brazil, where the rural women's rally Marcha das Margaridas continues in Brasilia. Our correspondent, Brian Muir, brings us the details.
An estimated 100,000 Brazilian women have come to the streets in the nation's capital today in the 7th Margaridas March. The Margaridas March was established by CONTAG, the World Workers' Union Federation of Brazil, and in all 26 states, statewide World Workers' Federations have sent dozens, if not hundreds, of buses filled with primarily women farm workers. Now they're here today to demand two things. First, they want more attention paid to the Bon Viver, or good living movement. And secondly, they're demanding a reconstruction of all the agricultural policies designed to help small farmers and extractivists, forest extractivist fisherwomen after the 2016 coup against Dilma Rousseff. On the eve of the event, the right-wing faction led by Bolsonaro's children in Congress tried to pass a measure complicating the execution of the march today. But from the looks of it so far, it's had absolutely no effect. This promises to be one of the largest women's political marches in the history of Latin America, today in Brazil.
Let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden said he will travel to Hawaii, the scene of the country's deadliest wildfires in a century, as soon as possible to survey the damage and comfort the survivors. The 80-year-old Democrat, who was speaking during a visit to a factory in Wisconsin, dedicated the start of his speech to the situation in Hawaii, where at least 99 people have died in the blazes on the island of Maui. Biden, who quickly declared a major disaster in Hawaii, unblocking federal aid funds, said he had spoken multiple times with Hawaii Governor Josh Green. Any presidential trip is a complicated operation in terms of logistics and security, requiring multiple local agencies to cooperate and potentially taking manpower away from the situation at hand.
Governor Josh Green multiple times and reassured him the state will have everything it needs from the federal government. I immediately approved the governor's request for expedited major disaster declaration. That's a fancy word of saying whatever you need, you're going to get. To date, FEMA has approved 50,000 meals, 75,000 liters of water, 500 beds, 10,000 blankets, and as well as other shelter supplies for survivors displaced from their homes. FEMA also authorized one-time payments of $700 per household to folks who have been displaced so they can do the immediate things of just taking care of medications and prescriptions that they so badly need.
On Tuesday, about 2,000 soldiers, 200 military vehicles, and almost 100 aircraft took part in Poland's first military parade since 2019 to mark the Polish Army Day in Warsaw. The parade was organized under the slogan "Strong, White and Red" and its culminated event of the celebrations. Poland said in January that it plans to increase defense spending to 4% of its gross domestic product this year, the highest level in NATO. According to NATO estimates, in 2022, the alliance spent 2.57% of its combined GDP on defense. The biggest spenders were Greece and the US, with Poland third on 2.42%. According to the Global Firepower ranking, the Polish army is ranked 20th among 145 classified armies from around the world, and in terms of military power, Poland is ahead of Germany, Spain and Canada. On Tuesday, at the International Security Conference, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that a multipolar world is emerging. At the 11th International Security Congress, Russia's head of state said that this reality was a key basis for the consolidation of stable and progressive world and development with countries ready to defend their sovereignty and national interests. Vladimir Putin stressed that the governments of some nations create and promote conflicts, divide brotherly countries, and seek to maintain neo-colonial and domination systems in order to exploit the resources of sovereign nations.
Today, it is obvious that it is possible to reduce confrontation at the global and regional level, neutralize challenges and risks, strengthen trust between states, and open up broad opportunities for their development only by joining the efforts of the world community. We have been and remain firm supporters of a multipolar world order based on the priority of the norms and principles of international law, the sovereignty and equality of states, constructive cooperation and trust.
During the international security event, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused the United States of undermining the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty by its support to the Ukrainian forces.
A number of key arms control and non-proliferation agreements have been derailed by the United States. They are now ready, there are even such fears, to encroach on one of the cornerstone elements of the global security architecture, the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons.
And the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the Ukrainian regime does not achieve results in the conflict with Russia, despite the comprehensive assistance of the United States and NATO.
Despite the comprehensive assistance of the West, the armed forces of Ukraine failed to achieve results. An example of this is the publicized strategic counteroffensive. The skillful actions of the personnel of the Russian armed forces, their coherence, and the high level of training make it possible to respond flexibly to the implementation by Kyiv of the plans of Western curators. Preliminary results of combat actions show that Ukraine's military resources are almost exhausted.
And the Belarusian Defense Minister Viktor Krenin accused the West of investing heavily to prepare the ground for a possible direct confrontation with NATO.
In the West, intensive military preparations are underway. A lot of money is being invested in this. It must be understood that in the capitalist world, no one will freeze their assets in weapons and a bloated army without a reason. Therefore, the conclusion can be drawn unequivocally. The possibility of a direct military clash with NATO in the future becomes quite obvious.
And TeleSUR English launches its own videos on demand site for you to go and revisit our interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings and more. Just go to the top left corner in our website homepage and click on the video option to access our VOD platform. And now we will have a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Defense of Niger confirmed that 17 members of its armed forces were killed in a terrorist attack. On Tuesday, the event occurred in the region of Tilaberi in the west of the nation at around 13:30 local time. The military office also reported that 20 other soldiers were wounded. The report noted that the quick reaction of the air and ground forces mitigated the severity of the terrorist assault, estimating that at least 100 of the attackers have been neutralized. The report noted that the quick reaction of the air and ground forces mitigated the severity of this terrorist assault, and the estimates put that 100 attackers have been neutralized. The authorities have indicated that the death toll is provisional, since among the 20 or so wounded are 6 who are in serious condition. On Tuesday, the struggle in Sudan entered its 4th month and thousands of people have died. Since Sudan's conflict erupted on April 15th, the country has been plunged into a dire humanitarian crisis. In a joint appeal, the heads of 20 global organizations pointed out that more than 6 million Sudanese people are one step away from famine and that the situation is spiraling out of control. In addition, they also said that more than 14 million children need humanitarian aid and over 4 million people have fled the fighting either within the war-ravaged country or as refugees to neighboring states. Meanwhile, the country has seen increasing risks of large-scale outbreaks of infectious diseases such as malaria, dengue fever, and cholera. The northeastern region of Syria has seen an increase in the military activities of Washington and its Daesh mercenaries and Kurdish separatist militias, an escalation that Syrians warned could lead to an unprecedented war between Damascus and its allies on the one hand and Washington and its agents on the other. Our correspondent Hisham Wanus with all the details.
Syrians warned that the invading troops of Washington plan to control the entire Syrian-Iraqi borderline and block the path of contact between the two neighboring nations and the resistance bloc ally Iran. Warnings based on local and regional media reports of the mobilization of military reinforcements to the illegal U.S. military base of Al-Tanf on Syrian soil from the Ain al-Assad enclave in Iraqi territory and the deployment of additional naval forces in the Red Sea and the Gulf area.
The United States war move in the area seeks to cut this line of contact that benefits both neighboring countries, both economically and socially, as well as in the military and security fields, that consolidates and strengthens the entire axis of resistance. Also, what the United States seeks is to create a state of shock with the Russian forces deployed in Syria to extort Russia and pressure Moscow to enter into an agreement that preserves Washington's interest in these and other areas of the world in the shadow of the Ukrainian conflict that is still underway.
Local sources affirmed the deployment of more than 2,500 armed agents of Washington in the area between the Al-Tanf base in the southeast of Syria and the city of Bukamal in the province of Deir ez-Zor in the northeast of the country. At the same time, the Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria records continuous violations by the U.S. fighter jets of the Russian-U.S. protocol for preventing clashes in the Syrian sky.
Joint Syrian-Russian military exercises and Russian long-range missile strikes against Daesh terrorist strongholds in the area, as well as the Syrian Arab Army's war action against extremists who recently attacked a Syrian military base in the northeastern province of Deir ez-Zor, all indicate that Syria and its allies are ready to face any U.S. military escalation, even if neither side is interested in a full-scale war that could involve regional and international forces.
While joint Syrian-Russian military exercises were announced in the northeastern region of the country, troops and military reinforcements of both allied nations were mobilized in this Syrian region, where attacks by Daesh terrorists have also increased on orders from Washington, according to Damascus and Moscow. Additionally, according to Syrians, an intense movement of troops and combat equipment foretells a possible large-scale war in the northeastern region of their country.
Hisham Wanus, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.